Hi, welcome to the 13th floor. I'm Marty Duda, and today we're very happy to have Myele Manzanza with us. Did I get the name correct?
Yeah, Myele Manzanza, that's it.
Man, that's half the battle right there.
Indeed.
Welcome to the 13th floor.
My pleasure.
Glad we got you up here. You're up here from Wellington to play a gig out at Anthology tomorrow, and you have a new album out, and it's all happening.
Yeah.
So the album is titled
A Love Requited.
A Love Requited, which is usually, love always seems to be unrequited
Yeah,
in music.
that's right. Well, I guess that was one of the themes of the album, as well as some of the, I guess, things I've been working through in my own life. I know a lot about unrequited love.
Right.
I know a lot about either, and unrequited love going both ways, you know, like having feelings for someone who doesn't reciprocate, or like feeling like you're not ready to be with someone who is ready to be like all in for you. And so there was a lot of I guess challenges around that I'd been reflecting on, and to have requited love, with, you know, love that's there for you and that you're ready to reciprocate and be there for return. It's kind of easier said than done, and it's you're lucky if you find it, you know.
Right.
And for me, I guess I thought of it as broadly, not just in like relationships, like romantic relationships, but in, you know, my relationship to music or my relationship to family. Like it's the sort of goal that I'm sort of working towards, or a north star of which I can navigate my way through the dark seas of life, I suppose. And I just like the flow of the title as well. It sort of draws, I mean, it has these other sort of deeper meanings for my own life behind it. It also is a little bit of a hat tip to John Coltrane's A Love Supreme as well.
Sure.
There's a lineage there that I'm, whilst I'll never live up to A Love Supreme, I'm, you know, that's also a nice sort of north star to kind of work towards.
Definitely.
And yeah, and aside from that, like, I'm really proud of the music that's on there, and there's been a lot of work that's gone into the actual composition and arranging and the art form of playing the drums and playing music. But this album specifically has given me, I sort of set myself the challenge, I suppose, of thinking more broadly than here's some good music played by good musicians. Like, I wanted to really tie it into themes around broader aspects of life, such as, you know, family, relationships, death, my relationship to music, and all of that. And so it was really, I had to sort of do a big sort of internal accounting of my own life and work through a bunch of feelings and issues and thoughts around various topics. And I used the music on this record as sort of a way to work through that and sort of turn it into something constructive and positive, and something that I could give to the world, and hopefully gives joy and benefit to other people as they hear it.
Cool. Now, speaking of good musicians, who have you got with us today?
Yeah, so for this New Zealand tour and the performance that we have on the 13th floor, you've got the one and only Jonathan Crayford on piano, Maestro Supreme, TUI award-winning pianist, big mentor for me as well. Like when I was like 18, 19, I got to play with him a lot, and he sort of exposed me to improvisation and a broader spectrum of jazz music, which I wasn't necessarily getting in the formal education side of things. And then on bass, you have Johnny Lawrence. He's one of the first cool bass players in New Zealand. I think he's played with Holly Smith, Louis Baker. He played with Electric Wire Hustle, which was a band that I was a part of a long time ago. And lots of sort of pickup gigs around Wellington, and we've been playing together a bunch over the years as well. And he's got a really good, solid feel, and he gives me a solid base for which to float around and play drums in a more painterly, abstract way, while still being confident that the foundation is there, because, you know, he's there and he's got my back, so I can always kind of lock back and use him as my navigation rudder.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Alrighty, now you're going to do two selections for us, and the first one is what?
First tune is called Family Dynamics.
Yeah.
And I mean, the title sort of perhaps says a lot there. It was initially written after observing a friend of mine who was visiting her mother, and the sort of how would you say, like, you know this, you know people in your relationship to them, but often when it comes to being around parents and family, there's this whole history of a lifetime where you might feel like you're this big responsible adult, and then when you're with your parents, it changes. You know, the parent sort of reverts to some sort of characteristical role, and the child who is now an adult in some ways reverts to this role, and there's this tension there, and I'm not immune to that. Like, right. I totally have the same thing, and it's something that we probably all have in our own way, and that idea, I guess, was sort of swirling around whilst I was composing the music, and so the piece Family Dynamics as a composition, I guess, loosely relates to these sorts of thoughts and feelings about family that I was observing and reflecting on myself as I was writing the music, and hence the piece Family Dynamics.
Excellent. Let's give it a listen.
All right.
Alrighty, we're back here with Myele Manzanza, and we just heard Family Dynamics.
Yeah.
We got another tune to hear. That's amazing playing, and it sounds really good in this room, I might say.
Thank you.
So it was a thrill to have this happening in here. But my understanding is, from the reading I've read about in the press and all that, is that you've the music on this album is more based around composition than it has been in the past. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. So where my first album, One, was definitely Myele, the beat maker, producer guy, and my second album, 1.1, was Myele, the live drummer, band leader guy. I would say A Love Requited, if anything, musically speaking, is Myele as composer a lot more. There was a lot more time given to sitting at a piano and hacking out chords and then getting on the manuscript paper and writing them out and then figuring out how to arrange that across various kinds of instrumentation and that kind of thing. So a lot more care and effort was given to that side of the writing process, as well as the drumming. And I am a drummer first and foremost, so that's always going to be strong. But yeah, I guess having delved a little bit more over the last few years into composition has been really good for me, because to some extent, as a drummer, I found myself getting into roadblocks creatively, because I mean, drumming is a limitless art form, but sometimes, you know, as people, we kind of come into roadblocks, or we get a little bit burnt out on one thing. And so being able to sit at a piano and just sort of play on that was a nice sort of refresh. And it's still music, but it's coming at it as a beginner again, which was really good for me. What I found is that part of why I was getting stuck as a drummer is I was trying to figure out my own sound, and as all artists, we are all trying to kind of figure out some sort of a semblance of our own sound. And I found, as a composer, because I was starting from the beginning again, it was a big refresh for me psychologically. I had no sort of hang-ups about not being very good as a pianist, because I knew I was a beginner, so that wasn't a thing I was dealing with.
Right.
And then as I gradually sort of put pieces and material together, and then I presented them to bands and started to play them, one thing that I noticed happening was, because I had set the frameworks of what we were playing, like the bigger picture frameworks, my drumming decisions started to become more intuitive, and my drumming itself probably developed a more distinctive style from what it had before, because I was just essentially playing the frameworks.
Right.
And there was less pressure to be a great drummer, and it's more just I'm playing this music. But because I'm writing the music and sort of setting the frameworks, the drumming itself because I'm playing my own frameworks, it became a more original and intuitive thing. And that process had this, I guess, a happy surprise of feeding back into my drumming and my own sound as an instrumentalist, as well as my own sound as a composer too. So it's been that's
pretty interesting.
Yeah.
To find that out, that composing, especially on a different instrument, than going back to the other instrument, affects the way you're going to approach it.
And the more I think about it too, like so much of what makes the musicians that we love distinctive is partially their ability and dexterity on whatever the instrument is, but it's also like the context in which they are putting their ability and dexterity into. So like Jimi Hendrix, for example, he's an amazing virtuoso guitarist, but a big part of Jimi Hendrix's sound is the musical choices and the stylistic choices that he had. So playing in a trio in a sort of a rock format gave him the framework in order for what we kind of, sorry, I'm losing my sentences here. But the bigger picture of what Jimi Hendrix was doing is somewhat his specific ability, and also like the actual context of what it's in.
Right.
And obviously I'm not as good as Jimi Hendrix, but I think writing my own music now has given my abilities as a drummer an actual context to exist within, which means that it has a bit more of a sound than it would if I was playing drums in various other people's projects, where I'm less of the person driving the overall picture.
Okay. So the next song we're going to hear, it's called
Ritual.
Ritual, right?
And Ritual, for me, it's the opening track from the album. It's probably the most deliberately aggressive track on there. And I guess that aggression, or that sort of the tension that's in that piece, in part was, without wanting to go into too much specifics, we all deal with anger. We all deal with the sense of frustration or tension.
She always makes an appearance.
Yeah.
She can't resist.
And and so there's been some deliberate musical choices, like the solo section just sits on an E minor, and the rhythm is quite aggressive, and it sort of lends itself to that kind of feeling and emotion. There's, I guess, some deliberate, slightly discordant things in there which create some elements of tension as well. And so for me, Ritual was very much playing with this idea of the darker, more tense, less pretty aspects of life that we all have to go through at some point, and I guess finding voice to that within music and a way to sort of express it in a constructive way, as opposed to actually taking that aggression out in negative ways. It's a good way to go, and music's a good outlet for me and for lots of people in that regard.
Cool. So, all righty. Well, thank you very much for coming up here and doing this. It sounded fantastic.
My pleasure.
Good luck with whatever you're going to do next, and hopefully
Indeed.
you can come back and we can talk about that when it happens.
Awesome. Thanks so much, mate.
Thank you.
All right.
Okay.